Hi, everyone. It's Grant Abbott speaking. This is probably, well, it's the first time I've ever launched Wills with Testamentary Trusts. Most of you probably will know that I've focused in on SMSFs probably for the last 20 years or 25 years, in fact, mainly because they have obviously some great tax concessions. But with my background is in tax. I did a Master's of Law at Sydney University, and had the absolute best teachers. The guys who were my professors were advising the OECD and so on and so forth. So they're all the bigwigs in the tax community around Australia, in fact, around the world. So I was very lucky to learn about strategy, etc., from them. And my first few years, obviously, I was pretty heavily focused in on trusts. Did a lot of work on trusts, unit trusts, when I was at KPMG, and also as a research director for the Tax Institute of Australia. From that perspective as well, we know that with Wills and Testamentary Trusts, I covered a lot of stuff inside my master's degree around succession and estate planning. And it's really been fairly eye-opening, the absolute problems that we do face in terms of putting together a really good estate plan. And I'm seeing more often than not, in fact, only just 2 cases I'm advising on just recently, where the lawyers have been involved, and if we lay down a really good, strong, secure structure, it would have just gone down. It wouldn't have been challengeable, and so on and so forth. But effectively, it cost around about $200,000, $250,000 litigation just to get to the stage where it is. So it's virtually an open goldmine for any lawyer to find a client who effectively wants to challenge a will or the other side of the equation. And also, from a professional point of view, also you've got to be extremely careful about acting as an executor of an estate. But look, let's go through. For us, what I've learned over the years and all my experience and working with all of you guys down the track is that really a great setup for business and investment purposes is the use of a discretionary trust, a bucket company, and also an SMSF. They should work seamlessly together to advance the wealth and income of the family. One of my strategies, I suppose, now that we go over where we've got clients well and truly above the pension cap in the accumulation phase, there's a lot of estate planning complications that can arise down that track. Next week, we'll be releasing the SMSF will, which is a set of binding death benefit directions, reversionary pensions, and also nominations. So that's going to be another kit in your armoury, which will work seamlessly alongside this will and testamentary trust. But I want to take you through this first. The main thing about that is that, look, we should be discussing with our clients, and it's nice to have built up large accumulation accounts, but if someone dies and that money has to be passed out, then effectively there could be, because it's on the accumulation side, there's going to be potential capital gains tax consequences if we transfer it out in specie or even if we cash in. The other side is if there are obviously adult children who are going to benefit, who are dependents for CIS but not for tax, there's up for a 17% tax on the taxable component. So in those instances, I'm advising a lot of people where there is those large ones that why not take the money out of the superannuation fund tax-free if they're over age 60 and put it into a family trust. Now you're going to have to manage that process through the pensions to make sure you wipe out the capital gains. But again, where I started many years ago, being the SMSF as being the one-stop shop, effectively for us, essentially we've got to use all of those structures and really build a good, strong structure for us. Now, both the discretionary trust and also the SMSF are both asset protection mechanisms, and they've got great tax concessions. So, they're like the 5-star vehicles for us. The company, the bucket company, to a lesser extent, is not a bad vehicle, but it does have its limitations on getting cash out of that company. It has to be paid out as a dividend, and we can't really stream it. Now, when we do build our trusts and SMSFs, as you would have seen, on the roadshow is it's really important to build in succession planning into them. One of the ones that just landed on my doorstep from a good mate of mine, Simon Makem, just recently was a whole lot of hullabaloo around family trusts, discretionary trusts, is that the corporate trustee of the discretionary trust, inside that trust there was a property and quite a large borrowing to one of Australia's biggest banks, and the executor of the estate effectively held the shares in that corporate trustee, and they didn't want to do anything. It was a challenged estate, so it meant that no repayments could be made on that property, which is an absolute disaster. As you can imagine, if that property is foreclosed, then the whole thing comes to pieces. And it's simply because there was no successor appointor put in place. Now, I've been through this before with you, and on the day, you can jump onto the Like Your Doc's website and put in place successor appointors just for the trust alone. That would have saved that instance at least $100,000 in legal fees. Now they're looking at foreclosure of the property, and that was under barristers' guidelines. So you just got to be really careful about that. The same way in SMSF, bring the children in, look at who is going to be the successor, and it's not only on death. This is a continuing vehicle. It's also going to be effectively on the life when we find that older members, if you saw an article I recently did for self-managed super, that really as we get older, people should retire as trustee but still stay on as members, and those people got enduring powers of attorney should take over. And I've got something, a bit of a special thing for you later on in this plan. But anyway, so if you don't have plans, as I said before, effectively the lawyers, honestly, they'll be rubbing their hands together, because they know just to even open up a file effectively is going to be like maybe $20,000 to $25,000. And of course, if it's in the estate and you're the executor, you're going to have to pay that money anyway. So just to do a challenge. So you're going to find that the thing about it is you don't get discounted or fixed fees like at Abbott-Family, where we do. If you don't know, we've changed TGA Legal to Abbott-Family. Both myself and my partner, Tony Anamoulis, who's our head partner, we work seamlessly together. But if we're doing advice on anything, we've got quite a bit on at the moment, we do it for a fixed fee. But if you're doing an estate or like a family law, there is no fixed fee. It's open-ended work, and it's at full recoverables. Now, for the accountants out there, wouldn't you love to have that? In fact, the best ones for full recoverables, I used to know my good mate McGrath, who was at KPMG at the time, who's the insolvency expert. And again, if you have a look at that, once you go to insolvency, again, it's full recoverables. Unfortunately, in this day and age, it's not that case for us. Now, we're moving a little bit beyond that. So I'm talking this up, but for those assets that sit outside of our trust and also our SMSF, essentially they're going to be guided by our wills and our testamentary trusts. We can't transfer, we can, but it's very unlikely they're going to transfer assets or stream income from a family trust into an estate. We may, if we want to, but you certainly is something that I would not recommend. We may want to transfer superannuation benefits on death into an estate. But if we do, then we've got to make sure our wills and testamentary trusts are perfect. So look, I've built a really strong document here. In fact, it's a very strategic. It's been passed around a number of lawyers, and they've all given it the thumbs up. So what I want to do is take you through that process, and before we get there, just show you a couple of my ideas around the whole thing. As I said, I don't want to labour on this, but structuring for succession, we need to go into our discretionary trusts, even for your clients. I'll draft up a letter a little bit later on, but we really need to go and tighten up all of this sort of stuff that, let me just get my little nice little spotlight here. We really need to make sure we've got chains of appointors down the track, so that if we do have a corporate trustee and that corporate trustee is caught up in the estate, which it shouldn't be the case if you're using one of our leading member corporate trustees, it doesn't happen there, then if it does get caught up, it doesn't matter. There's a appointer who can get rid of that trustee and put themselves in as the trustee. SMSFs, we talk about succession, and then we've got wills. I like to think of all of these as potential silos rather than just all feeding into the will, particularly from most estate planning lawyers. They feed straight from there to there, which to me is not the way to go. We're better off doing our distributions, creating pensions, lump sums. And you'll see next week I've got an SMSF Death Benefits Trust, which will actually sit down there. Oops, sorry, I've jumped too much. Which will sit down there. And then at the last case, we'll go through the wills. But that'll come up in our SMSF will. So watch out for that 10 o'clock next week. It'll be very exciting. From our perspective, the reason I'm so excited is that, it's been very difficult. It's been very difficult for us to go through that process of having clients and then passing those clients over, particularly if they've got an SMSF, to an estate planning lawyer who really is no expert around superannuation and probably is running off a fairly old will and testamentary trust template. Let it be known that most legal firms in Australia do not do or have their own wills and testamentary trusts. They just simply buy other lawyers or large lawyers' templates and then they modify that for their own purpose. So again, it's a very clunky system because they get the template down in their Word doc, they have to put it together and all that. Ours is all automated and it's certainly the best strategy engine that I've ever seen around the world, and like super proud of it. And really, it's great now that you will now be able to take control of the whole estate planning, make it cohesive, make it safe, certain and secure for your clients. And more importantly, the fees will go to you rather than a lawyer. So let's before we go to the Wills and Testamentary Trust, just a quick heads up. This is the information that we need to know, and I'll show you, I'll build one for us very shortly. I'll also have a chat with my team to give you a code. I'll see how this works out, but to give you a code where you can do your own will and testamentary trust. And I'll go through that process now, but look, it's really important that if you're going to a client to really walk your talk, and I'm sure many of you either haven't got wills or the wills you've got are very outdated. Your clients have got wills that are probably, again, very outdated or poor templates, or more importantly, what we call simple wills. And unfortunately, there's no such thing as a simple will anymore. So you'll find with our process, we'll go through it. It's very easy to understand. Like all of our other products, it's $99 to complete the will on the site. We will be, at this stage, we don't have a mutual will option, but we will be doing that next week. I've just got to get a bit of heads up, so that will be released next week. But certainly we've got these one-offs, and you'll start to see this is quite a specific one-off. And look, if the parties aren't exactly the same, it can be quite difficult. Anyway, the key people we need to know are obviously the testator, the executor, and the same thing as we've done with our trust and also our SMSF. If the executor doesn't want to take over, so we might name an executor who's going to take control of the estate on the death of the individual or the testator. But if they don't want to, or they're overseas, or they don't have the time, or they're incapacitated, or they're dead themselves, we need again to put a chain of successors in there. Now, we don't have to have one executor. We could have 2 or 3 people acting as executor. If that's the case, then we need to know that if there's a tied vote, who has the binding vote, etc. But we'll come down to that one. So we need to know the testator, the executor, the successor executors, if they're joint, and more importantly, the beneficiaries. So the beneficiaries you're going to find will be either, what I like to do is specific bequests. So rather than having a residuary estate, a typical simple will is I give everything to my spouse, which is A-OK, but again, there's not much sophistication there. And I've built in a lot of sophistication in here for you guys to get on top of. And again, I'd wholly suggest you do your own estate plan or own will and testamentary trust. So we can do specific bequests such as property, jewellery, cash, cars, really any asset the testator owns. So this is a great way of passing, for example, a farm or a commercial property or any property that might be sitting inside or might be owned by the testator, and that could be wholly or it could be in part. So, for example, as a tenant in common or in partnership, passing that direct through as a specific bequest to a specific beneficiary. For example, it may well be a farm that goes down to my eldest son, who's actually working on the farm, or the eldest daughter working on the farm, so that you've got those wishes are in there, and that's then passed through. Now, you'll see when we go through, because we've got all of these people here, that the executor may well be a beneficiary. You're going to pop these names up all the time. We've made things easier by putting names up front we call common parties. So what we do is you'll see very shortly, we're filling in common parties, and then that makes it a lot easier for us to go through the system. And you'll see, I don't want to jump in, let's have a look at it. Now, where we have a specific bequest, then you'll find in the document I'll show you, basically any bequest there, the executor, on the advice of the specific beneficiary, may create a testamentary trust. And there are rules around the testamentary trust. It can be fixed or it can be a discretionary trust, and it's created out of the deceased estate. Now, the benefits of the testamentary trust, of course, are that we get asset protection built into the estate. That doesn't mean that it can't be challenged. Anything inside the will can effectively be challenged if someone believes they're not being adequately provided for. The testamentary trust happens after effectively all the challenges are met by the executor, which is one of the disasters about this, because if there's a challenge, you're looking at least a year to potentially 18 months to get down this track. If it's probably if it's a $2 million estate or more, you're looking at least probably around about 10% of the estate in challengeable legal fees. So compared that to the SMSF we'll look at next week, which is a lot more safe, secure and certain. But again, we have to do a will. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we do specific bequests. And then after the specific bequest, we can actually create a testamentary trust. If not, then we work out who the main beneficiaries are. So it's usually the spouse. So after specific bequest, then everything goes to the spouse. But if she's not alive, then we have residual beneficiaries. And of course, one of the big ones you'll see there is that if there's a property that's owned by the deceased, and we want to create a life tenant that is for example, goes to the spouse, and if the property is in the name of the deceased, we might have a life tenant there. So it's to go in the spouse's name. She's to stay there for her life, and then on that, because it's a life tenant trust, the capital of that, which is the underlying property, effectively can be distributed to the requisite beneficiaries, who are going to be created by the executor. But we'll go through a lot of that sophistication there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to jump out, and we'll have a quick look at the Lightyear Docs suite. You can see there. So if I come on here, because I've already started building it, and hopefully it works, you'll see here where I've got if I want to create a doc, so I just got to move this away. So I go to Lightyear here. Now you can see up on the right-hand side, there I'm a LY strategist. And for those of you who don't know about our pricing, as I said, we've got, if you want a demo, it's $0, but at the moment we've got $99 docs. You've got $595 per month, which is if you just want to do a doc. So that's a great option. But if you want CPD as well for all your firm, it's $795. Or there's our licensing option where you can get 1, 3 or 5 year licenses, which I'll talk a bit later, but that's certainly a great option. Anyway, I'll go down and I have a look at my estate planning suite. So I can either type in here my last will and testament. So that'll pop up there, or I know it's in my estate planning. So let's go down to the estate planning category. So you can see there, I've got all my enduring powers of attorney. Still got to get round to Northern Territory and Tasmania. So sorry about that. Family allowance, and we've got the last will and testament, which I've been working on. So here on the last will and testament, what I've done is I've already set it up just to save time. You can see here, I go down and I put in my vault exactly where the best place is to be stored. So then I'll go into common parties. So when I go into common parties, these are ones you use in the document. So to make the completion of this document easier, we've placed common parties, those parties which may appear more than once in the document, up front for you to complete. Later in the document, where needed, it is then easier to choose one of the parties rather than retype information, not information. You get as many common parties required by clicking the Add Another box underneath. So what I've done here, I've got the person who's going to be the testator, so I've put them up, John Smith. I've added another. So all I have to do is add another, but you can see when I add another, that pops up another variable, another sheet up on the left-hand side of the interview. So I've got the next person on, I've got Sally Smith, which is John's spouse. Matthew is his son. Marie is his daughter. William is his grandson, and Ben is also his grandson. So I'll put all that detail in. It's a good way along the line to always save the answers. You don't want to get down to the track and find you, particularly where you've got a longer document like this. So when I go in and again, get those common parties right. So now I start off and put in the testator, and we're going to get to the testator's advisor a little bit later on. So when we go down the track here, looks as though when we go down the track here, we want to put in the date of the will. We can leave it blank, but what I'm going to do just for our purposes, I'm going to put the will tomorrow. So who's the testator? Well, in this one, it's John Smith. So you can see there, oops, sorry, wrong party, John Smith. So you can see there, all John Smith's details are there, and that will now be embedded into the document. So that's why I was saying it's much easier to do this. Now, another one that I put in here, appointing a professional to help the executor. So to make things smooth and efficient when a person passes, it's important to have a professional, such as an accounting firm, financial planning firm, or to a lesser extent, a lawyer to manage the process of implementing any testamentary trusts, getting the estate underway and advising the executor, person responsible for the estate's affairs and taxes. Here you can insert the name of the professional, the firm you want to do the job. So let's say here is Abbott and Morley, lawyers, Melbourne. But you can put your own firm in there, which I would suggest. It's not, you don't necessarily want to get lawyers involved. You actually want to, you're going to be doing the taxes of the estate. You're going to be advising the executor. You're going to be setting up any testamentary trust using the Lightyear platform. So, look, from my perspective, the best person really to act not as the executor, but as the advisor is going to be the accounting in there. But what we've got here is we've got Abbott-Morley, because Tony and I love to do these sort of things. So that's the testator, that's the person whose the will is. Now we go down to the executor. So again, the executor is a personal act. So in this instance, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make Sally the executor in relation to the spouse. So in relation to the executor, she is the spouse. Oops, lots of P's there. You can actually see how easy it is for me. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another there, because if I have a look at it, it's just a bit, you know, it's probably for Sally. The good thing about all of this is that once it's completed, and remember, want to save as we go along. Once it's completed and we print it out in draft for the client, go through with it in draft with the client, then if they say, look, I don't want this or I want that, it's very easy to remember, go back in, relaunch the document and do it again. And the fact is that we've got all these names already pre-populated in the system, just makes it easier. Eventually, we'll get down to integrating with your with customer relationship management systems or CRMs, whether it's Xero or whether it's Class or whatever, whereby we can pull a lot of these initial names and family members together. Although, remember, when we're doing a will, we're putting as many family members as is possible. So we've got the successor executor. So at the time of death, the original executors may not be around. Now, if I go back here and I've got Sally and Matthew, then if Sally's not around, then Matthew takes over. If Matthew's not around, Sally takes over. So they're both acting jointly. But if neither of them want to do it or neither of them are around, then we want to put in place a successor. So what we'll do is we'll do Marie there, and we won't add another. So Marie is the next in line in case all of that happens. We then go, I can either go on here and do next, or it's just as easy to do here. So because I've got two two there, remember Sally and Matthew, so that because there's two parties there, if they disagree, then the whole estate gets tied up, and that's the last thing. So I need to go through, again, I've thought through this very carefully. I'm trying to make sure there's no litigation as possible. You can't guarantee it unless it's in an SMSF. But let's make Matthew as the binding vote, so that if it's a tied vote, Matthew really holds sway. Now let's go through to the estate beneficiaries. So the estate beneficiary is that person or persons who will be receiving the deceased assets as per the wishes of the testator, and to be completed by the executor when choosing a beneficiary. You can choose a spouse, child, or others such as a brother or charity. The most important person of the beneficiary is they take the residual of the estate after any specific gifts and bequests, which we'll look at. There may be one person such as a spouse who's the main beneficiary. Select that person, then check the box that they are the main beneficiary. Note there may be more than one beneficiary, such as a spouse and a child share equally. So in here, I'm going to choose the spouse. And is the spouse the main beneficiary? I'm going to say yes. And who is the spouse? Then we go down and we know it's Sally. So that's the main beneficiary. Then we can add another beneficiary. So we might go down and say we've got a child. Is this the main beneficiary? Remember, this is going to be if the main beneficiary is the ones who share the estate. Now, if this is in the event that Sally is not alive, then in that instance, what we do is we're going to have residual. So what we've got here is it the main beneficiary? No. So select the party, it's going to be Matthew. Does the children, or does the child, I have to fix up a bit of language here, sorry. Does the child have any children? Name of the children, well, I've already put in there Ben Smith, so I might get our developer just to put in a select party there as well. And then William Smith. And the reason we do that is if the way it works is because it's more of like a bloodline will, so that when we have a look, if it's Matthew's not alive, then it's passed down as part of a trust for Ben and William. So that's just the way it is. Now, if I want to go and appoint a next there, so actually specific requests, I've got the estate beneficiary. Let me go in, I need to add another. So sorry about that one. I've got here, I'll do another child. And what I'll do here is Marie Smith. So when it comes down that track, is she main beneficiary? No. Does she have any children? No. And that's basically it. Now, are there specific bequests? So when I go through this one, specific gifts are great where thought has gone into estate planning. So where you get a simple will, there's no thought at all, which is also dangerous if you ask me. The alternative is leave the residual estate to the main beneficiaries, which is a simple will. However, where the testator wants to give specific gifts known as bequests to a beneficiary, such as shares, jewellery, property or motor vehicles, the box for specific requests should be checked, and this will add section of the will for specific requests for specific beneficiaries. Now, in completing that wish, the executor may incur costs such as legal costs or stamp duties on the transfer of property. Who will pay for those, the estate or the beneficiary? So we need to have a look at it. So is there a specific bequest? Yes. Who's actually going to pay for the expenses? The estate. So once we go down there, we then go into the next box, which is the specific bequest. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say Matthew, and it's going to be commercial property in Coolum. Now, again, what we want to do there, and I could do a number of assets here, so I could say this and then say 5,000 ANZ shares. Now, on death, if there's no commercial property in Coolum or ANZ shares, then effectively he misses out. So it's important, and also it's important to be as specific as possible. So when I go to commercial and property, it'd be great to actually have the full address. So it could be, for example, could be 114 Coolum Road. Cool. So we want to be more specific, and again, the shares. So that's a specific request for thing. Now let's go down. We might go and say Marie is to get my BMW. I don't even know what a BMW. I'll stick to Mercedes because I know those. Mercedes E500 convertible. So that goes to her. Add another. Ben is to get all my Mad magazines. That's a collector's editions. If you don't know what that is, look, it doesn't make any difference. And then William, oops, sorry. So you can see I'm actually sharing those, but I don't want to do that. I'll add another. So I'll get William is going to get $20,000 cash. So you can see what we've got all of that. There's specific requests. Now, Sally's the main beneficiary, so we have to pay all of these out before Sally gets her stuff. So I could put in there, if I wanted to, a specific request for, so I don't want to do that, a specific request for Sally if I wanted to, but otherwise no. Now, the life tenant, when I've got here, I've got the life tenant, 5 Smith Street, and then that's going to go to Sally. So we've got to work out from the estate how many years expenses that are going to be met by the life tenant, or sorry, by the estate. So we'll put in there 3 years of expenses to cover that life tenancy. A life tenancy, as I said before, is simply where we have a Michael Jeffries haven't been folded. Thank you. Very funny. So when we go through that process, that then creates that life tenancy for Sally. So we then go down to all the signers. You can start to see that's the end of my interview. And now I'll process it. So that'll throw us up the will. As I said before, at any point in time, you can go back and you can change. You want to save your answers on the way through. You can go back and relaunch if you haven't got anything there for the client. So this is in a draft form. It's in a PDF. For those of you, I'd strongly suggest anyway, I use, for example, down here, can you see Nitro? Nitro is a document that you can use, you can actually make amendments, you can put in stamps such as, draft and all that. So you want to put that in before you can send it off to the client. So all of this interview that we've just done, you can actually get a lot of this straight by sitting with the clients face to face with a junior who would then create that document for you. I wouldn't say, look, give it to the client straight away. I would, wait a day, just say, look, we'll go through, check everything, check your assets, and then pull it up. So the last will and testament here, we haven't put any stamp on this. Now, a couple of things on this one is if you want, so if you're doing your own will and testament, it's okay. So you can go through that process yourself, complete it, so on and so forth. Now, if you're completing it on behalf of your client, there's 2 options there. First option, I'll get Tony on a little bit later on to have a chat about what's required. But at this stage, effectively, you can either prepare it for the client, give it to the client, they can review and then go through the sign-off process. Or alternatively, you may want to, because the last will and testament is very close to doing legal work, unlike most of the other documents, or unlike the other documents that we have on the Light Year Docs site. So you might want to engage Tony. The process there is that you'll send through a 100-point check for the client, but if you already know the client, you've got the 100-point check. You also need to get a letter from the doctor that they're of sound mind and body, which is required anyway. So you definitely those 2 precursors before doing last will and testament. And then just jump on a Zoom with Tony, and he'll go through the whole draft of the last will and testament. And once it's completed, he'll then come back with an Abbott-Family logo. Now, the cost of that is $495, which is very inexpensive. What it does is you can still charge your fees, but the $495 would just simply do get the Abbott-Family sign-off there. So you can see there we've got the Abbott-Family sign-off. So let's just go through and have a look. Hopefully you can do, I just want to take you through a few things here. What I might do is I think I've downloaded that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show it in the folder. So I've got my last will and testament sitting up there. I'm going to go into Nitro now. So I'm going to open. And if I have a look at my computer, browse, and my last will and testament, open it there. And as you can see, that pops up now in my system. So this way I can put in signatures if I wanted to. You can see there I'm going to highlight. I can do reviews, so I can I can add notes, highlight. I can do drafts and all that. But let's go through anyway, and I'll just turn this annotation off, and we'll go to the highlight button. So last will and testament for John Smith. We've got there, this will is made on the 8th of November, but remember we said is John Smith, 8th of November. So these are all the fields that we did this morning. If you've left it blank, then you can just leave that blank, come in later. Once you know the exact date, you can go into the relaunch. So I could go in and say, okay, well, no, I know it's going to be coming, the client's going to come in and sign it today and witness it today. So if I've left it a little bit later, I can go into my vault. And oops, I forgot about that one. So I've made a little bit of a blue there. So I'll just log in, and I logged out. So sorry about that one. So I go into my vault. I look down the Abbott-Family there, and that will pop up all the docs there. And you can see here, last will and testament. I go down there, download, delete, or I can effectively relaunch. So that again, we've just been through this. Remember all of that. So I go through, and I can go through to the date that it's actually been done, which I think is on the test data page. So let's say that the client's coming in on Monday. I just simply change that date. And then when I do that and I get through, I can then just complete it, the finish, if I wanted to, and that will go through and set me up with another document. But here I'm going to go through the last will and testament, and we'll go through a few issues. Now, importantly, just have a look at this sentence here. This is where I've seen so many wills try to get up. As I said, if I go back here, and I'm going to keep on harping on this with you time and time again, is that, oh, there we go. These things are quite separate. We've got discretionary trusts, SMSFs, and we've also got wills. So they're all quite separate. And we can't, and it's impossible to put directions in here to actually influence those people. Now, we could have the executor of the will who comes in and acts as a replacement trustee for the deceased member, or the executor there who is appointed as appointor, provided the discretionary trust document allows. But this can't influence these. Whereas we see so many times, we see instances of lawyers and the documents trying to influence the discretionary trust in the SMSF, which once you do that, it ends up being an absolute nightmare. So I've got a couple of questions from Ken Race, 2 questions. If shares in a corporate trustee of a family trust are sent to a testamentary trust, can the TT decide who will be the directors, and so the TT controls the trust? Yes, I would do that. But the problem is that's exactly the issue that was raised in this case. It's cost a couple $100,000 to address, is that if the shares of the corporate trustee end up going into the estate and then it's challenged, then everyone's going to want to take that corporate trustee. Whereas a better way is if there's succession, and even if the shares are involved in there, for example, if Michael has the appointorship as a successor appointor, he can come in and basically cancel, obviously, or remove the trustee and take control himself. An alternative, as you'll see in our leading member corporate trustee, for a leading member trust, what happens there is the leading member owns all the shares of the corporate trustee, and on their death, their shares are cancelled, and the next leading member, which would be Matthew, is appointed with the shares. So again, we're trying to make sure we don't get caught up in that legal stuff. Question 2, if the TT is correctly set up, are the assets in the TT safe from a spouse of a TT beneficiary in a divorce? As a beneficiary does not own the assets and did not create the family trust. Yes, we'll go. I'll have a look at that one, and as I go through, I'll show you how I would do that from this document. So again, I'm just going back in here. Here I put in, however, it does not seek to influence or direct any trust or superannuation fund where I was trustee or beneficiary at the time of my death, unless the succeeding trustees or those trustees otherwise allow. Now you're putting that in there because if it is challenged, everyone's going to want to have a look at the will. This is the last will and testament. So what you're doing is you're trying to put a ring fence around your, well, not trying, you are putting a ring fence around your SMSF and also your family trusts. So the barristers and all that know that it's basically off limit. Now the revocation declaration, I hereby revoke all formal wills and testamentary distributions, that's dispositions. Now the appointment of my executors and trustees, I hereby appoint my spouse, Sally Smith, and my son, Matthew Smith, subject to their consent as my executor and trustee of my estate. Each executor must consent to their appointment, and where there are more than one executor, any decision is being made, be a majority decision. In the event of a tied vote, Matthew Smith is to have a binding vote. If one of my executors predeceases me, then the others become the sole executor. So again, this is built into the document. Now, if Sally and Matthew predecease me or are unable to, one willing to act or continue to act as my executor, I hereby appoint Marie Smith of 5 Jones. Now, it's very unlikely that the whole 3 of them are going to be unable to do that. But if you want to, you can basically put in yourself. I could go back in here. Remember, I've got my, not this one. I've got this one, sorry. No, I've got this one. So I'm going in, relaunching that. And that's popping up. And then what I can do there is I can go to successor executor. I could add another one. And for example, it could be, most of the ones are gone. Let's say that William, let's say that William is now 18. We can put him in, save the answers, and then that's going to change your document straight away. So then you go through the process again. So, but again, that should really cover most of it anyway. Now, this is important here. So my executor shall be the initial trustee or trustees of every trust established by my will, including the life tenant trust, which we're going to look at, testamentary trust, and superannuation proceeds trust, unless my will provides otherwise in relation to particular trusts or trusts. However, the executor may decline such a position if my will does not appoint otherwise. My executor may appoint the trustee of any trust established by my will. So any TTs and all that, it's really up to the executor unless we provide otherwise, and I'll show. Provision of advice, that should really be on the next page, but you can see there, it is my strong wish that my executor obtains and considers the advice from my advisors, Abbott Morley lawyers from Melbourne, in making business management and investment decisions when administering my estate and also any trust established by my will. Any advice is to be properly remunerated and ongoing for both my estates and any trusts arising from this estate. The initial administration, which is basically gives them powers to sell, convert, or whatever, to pay funeral expenses, taxes, debts, and all that sort of stuff. So that's pretty stock standard. We've also got there, in the event of my estate's insolvency, my executor should not be required to use any payments that paid in my estate to pay my creditors. So again, we've got an insolvency clause in there. So the beneficiaries of the estate are as follows: Sally and my children, their family. So Matthew, Ben, and William Smith. So that should really be, I'll note that and get developed a fix up. And also my child, Marie Smith. So now what we're doing to get it to is our specific bequests. So this is really, when I have a look at this, you're going to find both here and also in the SMSF rule when I get to next week, we are going to offer specific bequests. Because once we do this, we're actually getting to a tailored, bespoke version there for your clients. So here, We've got Matthew Smith surviving me by more than 30 days. And the reason that is because it usually takes quite a bit of time to get probate anyway. So when someone dies, the will doesn't have effect straight away. You need to get probate, then generally it will take effect. And the executor is appointed, then you go through this distribution, as opposed to superannuation, as you'll see next week. So we've got the commercial property there. You've got Marie getting the convertible. You've got the Mad Magazine's collector's editions with the, obviously there's no fold at the back because it's collector's edition. And then you've got $20,000 cash. Now, this is an important one, and this is going to TTs. In making a decision, so I'll go through there. In making a decision on the disposition of any specific asset pursuant to the above bequest, the executor, following discussion upon the advice of the estate's professional advisor, which is you, may place, transfer, or allocate any specific bequest to a testamentary trust established for their benefit. So that's the specific beneficiary and the benefit of any person they appoint as a beneficiary, or those persons who are my lineage or the lineage of my parents or grandparents. So when we have a look at it, it's the specific bequest. Now, the trust is to be a testamentary trust with terms and conditions as noted in clause 15. The specific bequest beneficiary is to be the appointer of the trust. It may also be the trustee or director of the corporate trustee of the trust. If the specific bequest beneficiary does not or is not capable of acting as trustee or director, blah, 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 it all goes on. So for William Smith, maybe the 20,000, but he's turning 18. Mad Magazines I wouldn't worry about, convertible I wouldn't worry about. But certainly here, the commercial property and the ANZ shares for Matthew, probably not a bad idea to put it into a testamentary trust because we know that Matthew's got two children, Ben and William. And because it's a testamentary trust, any cash or income or capital gains that goes down to them is just taxed as normal assessable income. So I'd certainly probably create a testamentary trust for there. But we're not forcing the issue. We're saying, look, at death, because you don't know who's going to be alive or who's going to be dead, so you can't create a testamentary trust in these wills, although I've seen lawyers try to do that, which is crazy. So what we do is we put that down, and then we've got an option. As you can see, I've done a really open-ended, very sophisticated estate planning suite. Any reasonable expenses, duties, etc., are going to be borne by the estate. Remember, I said there we can either make it the beneficiary themselves, but we've actually done it for the estate. Now, the life interest. So if Sally Smith survives me by 30 days, my executor shall the life tenant property, blah, 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 Fitz Smith, on trust for Sally Smith as the life tenant. Now, it's a life tenant trust. And because what's happening is the property is being held, she gets to use it for her life. Now, you don't set the trust up in here. These are the T's and C's that the executor needs to put in place. So it's going to be for 80 years or such time as the life tenant remains alive. So what we've got here is the trustees who act, the trustee of the trust will be the executor, with such other successor executor consents. Reasonable expenses to upkeep and maintenance of the property. We've got 3 years of expenses. They're to come out of the estate, or we've got to put enough in the life tenant trust to cover that. Cannot be sublet or leased to another party, so it's solely there. We've got obviously the executor, who's the trustee, solely there for Sally's purposes. Both the trustee and life tenant to make sure it's kept in good condition. And this is important. The trustee, with the consent of the life tenant, may dispose of the life tenant property. However, any residual proceeds may be kept in the life tenant trust with net income to be paid to Sally Smith as primary. So she can switch over a property if need be, particularly if there's a great, someone's come and said, look, 5 Smith Street's going off, it was $1 million, now 5. You can put that into life tenant trust and then go and buy a property of the same amount. Now, Sally Smith will receive benefit of residual estate. If she survives me by 30 days, she'll hold the residual estate on trust for Sally Smith as the primary beneficiary of the trust, so on and so forth. If she does not survive me to become a primary beneficiary of trust under this clause, my executor shall deal with the residual estate in accordance with the remaining clauses. In the event that superannuation death benefits are paid into my estate, let's go down. Basically says the survivorship requirement for Sally Smith is not 30 days, so it applies straight away. Should the primary beneficiary decide to hold my super death benefits in trust, the trust established pursuant to the requirements of 7.3 is going to be basically what we call a superannuation proceeds trust, which is again a testamentary trust. Now, if Sally's not alive, then it goes down to Matthew and Marie in equal proportions, as you can see in equal sections. And again, you can have testamentary trusts over that. And then what we've got here is if, for example, we noted Matthew, but if, for example, where a person nominated as primary beneficiary trust that does not survive me, leaves a child or children, then effectively that share is going to go to the children or going to go into a trust. So we've covered all that. General powers of executor, we need to tidy this up a little bit. My executor basically has got all the powers of a natural person. We've got specific powers, exercising powers given by the law, sell, call and convert money in my estate, postpone the sale, conversion of the whole or part of my estate. So there's huge amounts of specific estate planning powers there that we've got in there. Remember, we can put our, as a residual beneficiary or as a specific beneficiary, a charity if we want to. So these are all the, we can also deem someone to be a prospective beneficiary. That is, they're going to be potentially a primary beneficiary of a trust, and then our executor can make a payment for them. So, for example, if Matthew and his wife, who is noted here, Mary, she's got a child who's she's pregnant, then the executor may put aside some money for a prospective beneficiary there. So again, that can be done. Executors and trustees are to be paid, and then have a look through there. For the purposes of course, administrators shall mean my estate and SMSFs which in. So testamentary trust, my executor has power to create a range of trusts under my last will and testament, with each to be testamentary trust within the afforded tax concessions for Division 6. Any testamentary trust shall be established by my executor a broad range of terms and conditions, 80 years or kin, such other state tax laws. So if it's done in Adelaide, then effectively goes into perpetuity. We've got there trustees, the executor. There's a whole lot of terms and conditions. You can stream franking credits, capital. You can actually make it a fixed trust if you want. You can actually, here's a new one, trustee may pay an income stream or an annuity to a specific beneficiary. So there's a whole lot of really interesting stuff in there. And then you might have a superannuation death benefits trust. Now, there's a lot of hardcore stuff like parallel testamentary trusts, amalgamating testamentary trusts, which are discussed in there. That's probably not for the subject of this, but effectively we can create all of those under here, but that happens on the death. That's why you want to make sure you get a really good advisor on death to put that in place. And then we get executed by the testator and also the executor. Successor executors don't need to sign, it's just those parties and witness there. So that's a pretty sophisticated will and estate plan. As you can see, it only took me about 10 minutes to do. The main thing there is obviously getting these common parties up front, because then everything else fits in. So if we know the assets we want to give specific bequests to, the common parties, the life tenancy, then we're okay. What I might do is, Tony, are you there at all, or you want to come on and have a quick chat around with everyone else? G'day, mate. How are you?
Good, mate. How's yourself?
Yeah, good. So as I noted before, do you want to just go through the process? So if they're preparing it for a client, they can do it in a draft form, give it to the client, go and make as many changes as they want through the relaunch process. And once they get it to a final stage, if they want to get legal sign-off from Abbott-Family, what's the process there? I know they should obviously go to let you know at info@abbott-family.com.au. So info@abbott-family.com.au. What do you need in order to get it through, and how quickly can we turn these around?
We can turn these around within the same day or within 24 hours, no problem. So once it comes out in draft form, it'll get processed through to Abbott-Family, which I'll check, and then we can do a quick Zoom, say around about 45 minutes with the client and the advisor. And if any amendments need to be done, we can do them there and then without wasting any time. And then we'll put it into final form, and then we can start the execution process, basically. So that's as easy and simple as it gets.
And so the execution process, what you'll do is you'll be able to watch them executing it in front of you. Yep. And they'll be able to show you, and obviously you're going to have the advisor will need to get the ID and that letter from the doctor that they're of sound mind and body, yep. And then basically you're off and running.
Yeah. So what we've got to do before the execution process is to make sure that for our purposes we need verification of the client's ID, 100-point ID check, because it's standard under our Legal Profession Act. We've got to do that as we're opening up the file, and then we need the testamentary capacity from the client from his local GP, that is of sound and mind, basically. After we've done all that, then we're in the process of going through the will, making any amendments to it, and then we can start the execution process. And it's as simple as that, basically.
Really, most of the work is actually going to be done by the advisor with the client
Yep.
alongside the thing. So you're just going to be able to check, about the executors and all that. So
Absolutely.
look, it's a very simple process, but really it's providing all of you, I suppose, if I go back here, which is our idea, freedom. So effectively, you've got the freedom to create an amazing will and testamentary trust, as you've seen. But more importantly, build some great succession across not only the estate, but also the SMSF and also the family trust. And really, you're controlling the whole process, which means it's consistent, it's secure, and also the fees go to you. Apart from obviously the legal fees will go to Tony, which is $495 per member. But if it's husband and wife, then it's $795 to do both, which is, I think, is absolutely great value. And it's fixed fee, so you know exactly what you're getting, and you're going to be pretty strong.
Yeah, and also don't forget that all advisors and the clients basically have got direct contact with me and no one else. So I've got your backs at the end of the day. So
Now, this will work really well because what we'll do is you'll find next week we're going into the SMSF will. So you might actually bring the SMSF will and also the Will and Testamentary Trust together, so they're one document, which is going to be very exciting. So the SMSF will, you're going to see when we go through, is going to be very much the same. You're making specific bequests. Who is the replacement trustee? Who is going to get who's the main beneficiary, who's the residual beneficiary, and then creating SMSF Death Benefits Trust, which are a discretionary trust that are paid out of the SMSF, the SMSF will, as opposed to going through the testamentary trust. We'll cover that next week. Now, a couple of other issues just to wrap up. And thanks for that, Tony. It's great to have you, and I already know you're going to be pretty well booked up anyway from a lot of these.
Very quickly, Grant. There was a question from David actually about the capture of all the data. Yes, we've got a template that I'll circulate around, but just needs a little bit of work. It's just in relation to the template, the questionnaire. So we'll circulate around. We will circulate that questionnaire around the to the advisors for the data capture. So it'll make things much easier.
Yeah, I think one of the main ones there, I know David also asked about businesses. It's going to depend, David, who owns the business, because if it's going to be, is there going, if there is, obviously if it's sitting in a family trust or it's in a company, then we're going to have to work out how we do that. We might do a specific bequest. The other one is, I think, well, David, you're a licensee anyway. So with data capture for that, once you've done this once or twice, you're going to know exactly what's going on. So whether you send that out to the client or you actually obtain that for the client, the best strategy for me is to actually bring the client in, have a junior go through, and then just complete the interview questions that we just went through. So who are the main parties? Who are the beneficiaries? Who's the executor? Who's the successor executor? Do you want to make any specific bequests such as farms, cash, blah, blah, blah? Who's the residual beneficiary? Because all the testamentary trust and all that stuff is all open for application at the time of the transfer. I've also got a question here from Wendy. Great to see you on board. Wendy, again, Wendy's a licensee. So you can, being a licensee, you've got unlimited use. So you can, just play around, do as many wills as you want so you really understand the structure and the strategy. Is stamp duty payable on transfer to a life tenancy trust? It's going to depend on where it is. There's an exemption there in Queensland, but I'd have to check, and Tony would have to check as well in terms of other states. but I'm presuming it's going to be the case the same as in Melbourne there. Just a couple of things. The SMSF Strategy Day, the video is up and available. You can go to I Love SMSF. You'll find there that if you go to the shop oops, let me get to the shop. So I've got it in the cart, so sorry about that. You'll see there it's 4.5 hours, which is great. It's $99, but it's normally $149. Go and have a look at that. If you want CPD, you get an extra option, but most of you got CPD anyway. So from that perspective, if you use the code that we've got there, which is Roadshow all in caps, then it drops down to $49. So it's a great training and certainly a refresher there for you, particularly when we go around all of the estate planning and succession planning later on. We're going to be releasing our EPOA letter to you. So for those who've got EPOAs, it's a recommendation for clients to do their EPOA letter. If you've seen in the press, I've been going out and saying you really need to have something specific in your EPOA around replacement trustees. It's also matched up to the trust. So I've completed that. That'll come up. I'll probably do like a little mini webinar on that next week. So watch out for that, just a 10 to 15 minute one. In fact, what I'll do is I'll cover it off when we do our SMSF will next week. So make sure you're logged in for that. Just on the your site, go in and log on for next system. But we'll also do a Wills and Testamentary Trust letter for you to send out. It's a great lead up to Christmas for your clients. And again, make sure you're on the unlimited package. If there's 2 or 3 of you who are partners in a firm, use the licensing option through a superannuation unrelated investment trust where your SMSFs and your family trust can actually bundle together and buy a license from us, which really you're going to make. If you understand what's going on, it's a really great tool, and now puts you in complete control of our platform rather than us. So we're just slicing at that. Anyway, that's enough for me. It's taken a little bit more time, but again, this video will be up and running, released probably in about 3 hours. I just need to render it and put it up to Vimeo. But if you've got any questions, come to me at grant@ilovesmsf.com or Tony. So Tanamoulis at what's your new email address, Tony?
It's Tanamoulis, ANAMOURLIS at Abbott-Family.com.au.
Or alternatively, just go straight to info@Abbott-Family.com.au. Yeah. Anyway, we'll send you out a login so you can actually do a will as our gift for yourself. So you get one. Make sure you use it. It's a great opportunity to think about how you're doing it for yourself. I'm sure most of you got your wills or the wills you do have are pretty outdated. So it's a great opportunity to really build it for yourself. Anyway, that's enough from me. I think I've got one more question. Life interests of a PPO should not create a CGT liability in most states. So thanks for that, Ken. That's always good to have you on board. Anyway, it's Grant Abbott signing off. And look, go out and make hay while the sun shines. This is a great tool that we're placing in your hands. You can see how sophisticated it is. But as Tony says, Tony is there to give you full backup. Anyway, it's Grant Abbott, Tony, signing off.
And also, we're starting and we're leading up to our training sessions. Are starting from next Wednesday with a couple of firms in relation to these estate planning training platform sessions with advisors and clients. So whoever's interested in doing this, let me know so that way we can hook up
Actually, that's a pretty important one. We're doing some estate planning, 2-hour estate planning sessions with advisors. We're in Sydney next Wednesday and Thursday. We've got a couple of slots available if you want to get your team together. Alternatively, we can do it over a Zoom so we can spend a lot more time and train your team. And for our licensed users or unlimited users, or ones who are prospectively going down that track, we'll give you all the ins and outs, and there's no cost for that session, which is a great session to have both Tony and I there. So if you want to get in touch with Tony, this one, probably info@abbott-family.com.au. So thanks for reminding that, Tony. And we'll see you all. I'd love to come to your office and do a training session.
Fabulous.